The day we buried my father, my brother handed me a bill, not a hug, a bill. $9,400 for the last 11 days of the care facility we finally moved him to at the very end, after I had kept him out of one for 8 years. My brother Shane slid it across the hood of his truck in the cemetery parking lot in the rain, and he said, "You were closest to him, so we figured this one is yours." We figured. He and my sister had just inherited a paid off house worth $340,000, split right down the middle, plus the two retirement accounts, plus my father's truck. And I, the daughter who quit her job at 26 and moved back into my childhood bedroom to spoon feed a man who could not lift his own head, I got a bill and a key. One small key to a storage unit out on Route 6 that none of us had ever heard of. My sister Deborah actually smiled when the lawyer read that part. She said, "Oh, good, Iris gets the storage unit. That is perfect. She can keep all the sentimental stuff, the sentimental stuff." Here is what my sister did not know, sitting in that office in her funeral dress, already talking about which realtor to call. My father had been paying for that storage unit in cash every single month for 11 years. 11 years. Since the exact month I moved back home to take care of him. And the last thing he ever said to me, the last clear sentence before the strokes finally took his words for good, was not "I love you," and it was not "thank you." He grabbed my wrist with the one hand that still worked, and he pulled me down close, and he said, "When it is over, go to the unit. And do not take your brother. Do not take your brother." 6 weeks later, I cut a rusted padlock off a metal door out on Route 6, and I finally understood what my quiet, careful father had been building in the dark for 11 years, while his other two children were too busy to pick up the phone. If you have ever been the invisible one, the one who did all the work and then got handed the bill, do me a favor and stay with me right to the end of this. Go ahead and hit subscribe so this story finds more people like us, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from, because this one is for the ones nobody ever thought to thank. Let me take you back. My name is Iris. I am 34 years old now, but I was 26 when it started. And I need you to understand the shape of my family before the money, because the money did not create any of this. The money just turned the lights on so I could finally see it. I am the middle child, and the middle child in my family was always the help. My older brother Shane was the golden one, the athlete, the one my father bragged about at the hardware store. My younger sister Deborah was the baby, the pretty one who could do no wrong because she cried so beautifully when she did, and I was the one who was good at things. Good with my hands, good in a crisis, good at not needing anything, which in a certain kind of family is not a virtue, it is a job description. My mother died when I was 19, and after that, it was just the four of us, and my father, Walter, did not know how to talk to his children, so he mostly did not. He was a quiet man who fixed things. He worked at the county water department for 31 years, and he came home and he went out to his garage and he built and repaired and tinkered until the light went out of the sky. That garage is going to matter later, so hold on to it. When I was 26, my father had his first stroke. It was a bad one. It took the left side of his body and most of his speech, and the doctors sat all three of us kids down in a beige hospital room and explained that he was going to need round-the-clock care, and that the options were a facility which none of us could afford or family. And I watched something happen in that room that I will never forget. I watched my brother look at his phone. I watched my sister start to cry, the beautiful crying, and say that she just could not, that she had the kids, that she was not strong like me, not strong like me. And I felt the whole weight of it slide across that room and settle onto my shoulders, the way it always had, the way it always would. I had a job I liked, doing the books for a landscaping company. I had an apartment and a boyfriend named Kevin, and the very beginning of a life. And I gave all of it up in about the time it takes to say, okay, I will do it, because somebody had to, and in my family, somebody always meant me. Kevin lasted about 7 months into it. He said he did not sign up to date a nurse. I do not blame him as much as I used to. Let me tell you what caregiving actually is, because the word is clean and the thing is not. It is setting an alarm for 2 in the morning to turn a grown man so he does not get bed sores. It is learning to read the difference between the sound he makes when he is uncomfortable and the sound he makes when something is really wrong. It is your entire 20s disappearing into a house that smells like antiseptic and old coffee. I remember one night, in the third year in particular, it was February, and the power went out in an ice storm, and the house started dropping cold fast, and my father's care equipment ran on electricity. I was 30 years old, alone, in the dark, and I got him bundled into every blanket we owned, and then I ran the car in the garage with the heat on and carried him out to it one careful trip at a time. And we sat in that idling car from 2 in the morning until the power came back at dawn. I remember looking over at him in the dashboard light, this man who could not speak, and thinking, nobody in the whole world knows we are out here. Nobody is coming. It is just us. I called Shane the next day, still shaking, and told him about the ice storm, and he said, "Wow, that sounds rough." And then he asked if I had ever gotten that generator he had been meaning to mention. He had never been meaning to mention any generator. There was no generator. There was only ever me. For 8 years, I did that. 8 years. And in 8 years, do you know how many times my brother Shane spent the night so I could sleep? Zero. Do you know how many times my sister took our father for a weekend so I could have 2 days that belonged to me? Zero. They visited sometimes on holidays, and they would sit for an hour and comment on how tired I looked, and Deborah would rearrange the pillows she did not wash and tell me I should really take better care of myself. And then they would leave, and I would clean up, and my father and I would go back to our long, quiet days together. Because here's the part that took me years to understand, and it is the heart of this whole story. Those 8 years were not just a burden. Somewhere in the middle of them, my father and I became something we had never been before: friends. He could not say much after the strokes, but he could still, for the first few years, get out to that garage in his wheelchair, and he could still point and grunt and tap his good hand on the workbench, and I learned to be his hands. He would point at a tool and I would hand it to him, or he would guide my fingers to do the thing he could no longer do himself. We rebuilt a lawnmower engine that way, the two of us, over an entire winter. We fixed every broken thing the neighbors brought over because word got around that Walt could still fix anything if his daughter held the wrench. There was a rhythm to those afternoons that I did not appreciate until it was gone. He would tap the bench twice, which meant bring me the coffee, and I would bring it in the mug with the faded eagle on it, and he would hold it in his good hand and just look out the open garage door at the street for a while. Then he would tap the bench once, which meant we work now, and we would work. Mr. Delgado from 2 doors down brought us a radio from 1971 that had not made a sound in decades, and it took us 6 weeks, and the afternoon it finally crackled to life. My father laughed, actually laughed, a sound I had not heard since before the strokes, and he turned it up as loud as it would go, and we listened to a baseball game neither of us cared about until it got dark. That was the good part. People never believed there was a good part. There was a good part. And in the evenings, I would sit next to his bed, and I would talk, and he would listen, and sometimes he would squeeze my hand once for yes and twice for no, and we would have whole conversations that way. I told him things I never told another living soul. And one night, near the end of the 4th year, I was crying about something, about the life I felt like I was missing, and I said out loud, "I am sorry, Dad. I know I am the one who got stuck with this." And my father, who could barely speak, worked his mouth for almost a full minute to force out 4 words. He said, "You are not stuck." Then he tapped his chest over his heart twice. I did not understand what he meant that night. I understand it now. The strokes kept coming, small ones, each one taking a little more. By the 8th year, he could not get to the garage anymore, and he could not really speak at all, and the care got harder and more medical and more lonely. And that was when my brother and sister suddenly got interested, not in him, in the house. Shane started coming by more, and he would walk through the rooms in a way I did not like, looking at the crown molding, checking the windows, the way you look at a thing you are about to own. Deborah started asking pointed little questions about Dad's finances, about whether he had a will, about whether I had thought about what happens after, which is a thing you only ask the person doing the caregiving if you are already planning to collect. It came to a head at Thanksgiving that 8th year. I had spent 2 days cooking, the way our mother used to, because it was probably going to be Dad's last one, and I wanted it to be right. And Shane and Deborah came, and they ate, and they did not lift a single plate. And then, while I was in the kitchen washing dishes with my father asleep in the next room, I heard them at the table. I heard Shane say the house had to be worth at least $340 in this market. I heard Deborah ask whether they should get Dad to sign something now, while he still could, quote, hold a pen. And I heard my brother say the sentence I carried like a stone for 2 years. He said, "Look, Iris has basically been living here rent-free, so honestly, the house kind of evens things out for her time. Rent-free." I was standing at that sink with my hands in gray dishwater, having given 8 years of my life, while my brother in the next room did the math and decided that living inside a hospital I ran for free was actually my payment. I did not come out of the kitchen. I just stood there and let the water run over my hands until it went cold, and I did not say a word because I had learned a long time ago that in my family saying something only ever cost me more. I told them I did not know and did not care, which was the truth. I was not doing any of it for money. I did not even know if there was any money. My father lived like a man who had none. He wore the same work shirts for 20 years. He clipped coupons. The only strange thing was that once a month, even after the strokes, he would get agitated until I drove him to the bank, and he would go in alone on his own 2 feet in the early years, and then in the wheelchair with the teller coming out to him later, and he would come back out with an envelope, and he would not let me see it, and he would not explain. For 11 years, I thought it was a widower's ritual. I thought it was something to do with my mother. I never once imagined he was building me an ark. One time, in about the 7th year, I pushed him on it. We were parked in the car outside the bank, and I was tired and frayed, and I said, "Dad, what is in the envelope? Why every month? What is it?" And he looked at me for a long moment with those eyes that still worked when nothing else did, and he lifted his good hand and he patted the dashboard twice, the way you pat something you are promising to come back for, and then he pointed at me. At me. I thought he was confused. I thought the strokes had scrambled the wires, so I let it go, and I drove him home, and I never asked again, because asking seemed to agitate him, and the last thing I wanted was to make his days harder than they already were. He was not confused. He was telling me, in the only language he had left, that the envelope was me, that every month he was quietly putting his daughter somewhere his other children could never reach. I just did not have the key to understand him yet. The key was taped to a steering wheel, and it was going to take me 11 years and a pair of bolt cutters to finally hear what he had been saying to me that whole time in a bank parking lot. He had his last stroke on a Tuesday in October. We moved him to the facility because at the very end he needed machines I did not have, and he lasted 11 days there, and I slept in the chair beside his bed for every one of them. Shane came twice, Deborah came once, and spent most of the visit in the hallway on her phone. And on the 11th day, in the early morning, with my hand in his, my father died. I was 34 years old, and for the first time since I was 26, I had nowhere I had to be. I did not know what to do with my own hands. The funeral was on a Saturday, and it was in the parking lot afterward, in the rain, that my brother handed me that $9,000 bill and told me it was mine because I was closest to him, as if closeness were the crime and not the whole of what I had given. The will was read that following week, and I want to be honest with you, I went into that room expecting nothing, and I still somehow got less than nothing. The house, split between Shane and Deborah. The retirement accounts, split between Shane and Deborah. The truck to Shane. My father's tools, the tools we had used together for 8 years, the ones I knew by heart, went to Shane too, because Shane said a son should have his father's tools, and I was too tired and too gutted to fight for a single wrench. And to me, Iris, the lawyer read, I leave the contents of Unit 114 at the Route 6 self-storage, and the key there too. That was it. That was my inheritance for 8 years of my life. A storage unit none of us had ever heard of. Deborah could not hide her relief, and it curdled immediately into that little smile, and she made her comment about the sentimental stuff, and Shane, magnanimous now that he had the house, said, "Tell you what, Iris, you keep whatever is in the unit, and we will just call the 9 grand even." He said it like he was doing me a favor. He was, quote, forgiving my debt, the debt of our fathers dying. I want to pause here for just 1 second because I know a lot of you are feeling something in your chest right now, and I want you to hold on to it. The stories like this one, the ones I could not tell for years without shaking, I put on Perfect Revenge Stories first and nowhere else. If you want to be here when the next one lands, go ahead and subscribe and turn on the bell. Now, let me tell you what was in Unit 114. I did not go right away. I was too hollowed out. For about 5 weeks, I could not even drive past Route 6. But my father's voice would not leave me alone. When it is over, go to the unit, and do not take your brother. So on a gray Saturday in December, I drove out there by myself with the little key in my pocket and a pair of bolt cutters in the trunk, because my father, being my father, had put his own heavy padlock on the door on top of the facilities, and the key I had only fit one of the two. The rows of orange doors went on forever. Unit 114 was near the back, against the fence, and I stood in front of it in the cold, and my hands were shaking so badly I could barely get the bolt cutters around the shackle of that rusted lock. It took me 3 tries, and then the lock fell into the gravel, and I rolled up that metal door, and I sat down right there on the cold concrete lip of the unit because my legs simply stopped working. Because it was the garage. It was our garage. He had rebuilt it in secret, piece by piece, in a rented steel room out on Route 6. The workbench was there, the real one, that I thought Shane had gotten with the house, moved out here at some point when I was not looking, and replaced at home with a cheaper one I never even noticed in my exhaustion. His tools, the good ones, the ones that mattered, were here, hung on a pegboard in the exact outlines he had always kept them in, each one traced in marker so you knew where it went. There was a coffee mug on the workbench, the one with the faded eagle. He had brought it out here, and there was a folding chair, my mother's old green folding chair, set up facing the workbench, and a second one right next to it, and I understood in a rush that hurt like a physical blow that he had set up two chairs. One for him, one, always, for me, in a room I never knew existed. There was a calendar on the wall turned to the month he had his last stroke, and on a lot of the squares in his hard fought handwriting were little notes. Parts coming Tuesday. Ask Iris to drive me. Do not say why. Almost done. Almost done, he had written, 3 weeks before he died, on the wall of a room he built for a surprise he did not quite live long enough to give me in person. So he gave it to me this way instead. And in the middle of that unit, under a fitted canvas cover, was a shape I knew. I pulled the cover off. It was a truck. A 1968 Chevy C10 in primer when I was a girl, the project my father had never had the time or the money to finish, the one my mother used to tease him about, the someday truck. It was finished. It was beyond finished. It was restored to better than new, deep forest green, chrome like water, an interior of oxblood leather, sitting on tires that had never touched a road. He had been building it for 11 years, in a wheelchair. On the days I thought he was napping, on the mornings he made me drive him around, he had been paying men to haul parts out here, directing the work with his one good hand, finishing the one dream he had never gotten to finish, and he had done all of it where I would not see, so that it could be a surprise. There was an envelope taped to the steering wheel. My name was on it, in the shaky, hard-won handwriting of a man who had to fight his own hand for every letter. I opened it in the driver's seat, which still smelled like new leather, and underneath, faintly, like him. And I read the longest thing my father ever said to me, which he must have written over many, many days. He wrote, Iris, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and you found it, and you did not bring your brother, which means you still listen to your old man. He wrote, I know what they did. I was slow and I was quiet, but I was never stupid, and I lay in that bed and I watched your brother measure my house and your sister count my accounts while you were the one washing me. He wrote, I could not stop them from being who they are, but I could decide what they never get their hands on. He wrote, the accounts they are fighting over are the small money. There is a fireproof box bolted under the workbench. The key is in the glove box. Everything I actually saved for 31 years is in that box, and it is yours, and only yours. And I set it up with a lawyer downtown so that not $1 of it goes through that will they are all circling. And then he wrote the part that I keep folded in my wallet to this day. He wrote, you told me once you were sorry you got stuck with me. Iris, I want to tell you something and I need you to believe it. Those 8 years were the best years of my life. You did not lose your 20s. You gave them to me and I knew it every single day. And a gift like that does not go unanswered. Not by me. Go live now. Take the truck. And do not let them make you feel small for one more minute because you were the largest thing in my whole small life. I sat in that truck and I cried in a way I had not let myself cry at the funeral or at the will reading or in 8 years. And then I got up and I found the fireproof box bolted under the bench and I got the key from the glove box and I opened it. Inside were bearer bonds and savings bonds gone fully mature and bank certificates and cash and a passbook for an account in a trust with my name on it that he had been feeding a little every month for 11 years out of those envelopes I thought were about my mother. When the lawyer downtown was done walking me through all of it, the number my quiet father had hidden in a steel room on Route 6, the number my siblings had laughed about giving me, came to just over $410,000, more than the house. More than the house and the accounts they split put together. The invisible daughter got the whole visible fortune, and it had been sitting in the junk unit the entire time. Now here is where the lawyer part comes in, because I know that is what you are waiting for. My father, it turned out, had gone to see a man named Mr. Petrakis, an estate attorney downtown, about 9 years back. In one of those months, I drove him to town and thought he was at the bank. He had set the trust up airtight. The unit and everything in it and the trust account were structured to pass entirely outside the will, directly to me, with a paper trail a decade deep proving it was deliberate and sound of mind, drawn up in the years before the worst of the strokes. There was nothing to contest. My father had made sure of that because he absolutely knew, that the second Shane and Deborah found out, they would try. And, oh, did they try, because word gets around a small town, and about a month after I quietly paid a restorer to detail the truck and started for the first time in my adult life to breathe, my brother Shane showed up at my door. He had heard about the truck. He had heard the way people hear that there had been more, and he stood on my porch, and he did the thing our family does, which is to reframe a robbery as fairness. He said, Iris, come on, we are family. Dad clearly was not thinking straight at the end. We should split all of it 3 ways. That is only right. only right. This from the man who handed me a bill over a coffin. And I looked at my brother, and for the first time in 34 years, I was not tired, and I was not afraid of him, and I did not need his approval, because a dead man had reached out of the ground and handed me back my own spine. I said, Shane, you took the house, you took the accounts, you took his tools and his truck, and you handed me a bill and called it even, and I signed it, remember. You said, and I quote, you keep whatever is in the unit, and we will call it even. I kept what was in the unit, we are even. And I closed the door gently in the face of a man who had never once closed a door gently for me. Deborah tried a different way, the beautiful crying way, over the phone, about how hurt she was, about how dad had turned me against them, about how a real family shares. And I let her talk, and when she was done, I said one thing. I said, Deb, you told the lawyer I could keep the sentimental stuff. It turns out our father was the sentimental one. He kept everything, including a very good memory of who showed up. And I wished her well, and I meant it, and I hung up. Let me tell you where everybody landed because life keeps going after the door closes. Shane and Deborah sold the house and split the money, and it was gone within about 3 years, the way that kind of money always is, the kind that arrives without any weight of work attached to it. They do not speak to me much anymore, and I have made a peace with that which I did not expect to be able to make. I used part of what my father left me to go back to school at 35, and I got a degree in occupational therapy. And now I help people learn to use their hands again after strokes and injuries, which is not a coincidence and which I think would have made my father tap his chest twice. There is a man I work with now, an older man named Gus, who had a stroke last spring and lost the use of his right hand, and he was so angry and so ashamed the first few weeks that he would not even try. And one afternoon, I brought in a broken clock from a thrift store and set it on the table between us, and I said, we are not doing exercises today. We are going to fix this. Hand me that small screwdriver. And I watched something come back into his face that I had seen once before, in a garage, a long time ago. His wife pulled me aside on the way out and asked me why I do it that way, with the broken things. And I told her that a man once taught me that you do not heal a person by reminding them what they cannot do. You hand them a wrench and you let them find out what they still can. I learned that in Unit 114. I just did not know it yet. I kept the truck. I will always keep the truck. I drive it on Sundays, slowly, with the windows down, and men my father's age wave at me at stoplights and give me a thumbs up, and I imagine, every single time, that one of them is him. And I kept the storage unit too. I still pay for Unit 114 out on Route 6 in cash every month, even though I moved the truck to a real garage years ago and the unit sits mostly empty now. I keep it because I cannot stand to let it go. Because for 11 years, my father drove out to that lonely row of orange doors and built me a way out, one bolt at a time, and never said a word, and let his other children think I was the fool who got the junk. People ask me if I am angry, and I used to be, so angry it had a taste. But here is what I have come to understand, and it is the only thing I really have to give you. My brother and sister spent my father's whole illness certain they knew where the value was. They watched the house, they counted the accounts, they handed the burden to the invisible one and kept their eyes on the shiny things. And the entire time, the actual treasure, the real inheritance, was being built in secret by the one person they had all overlooked, for the one person who had never asked for anything, out of nothing but 8 years of somebody bothering to show up. So, if you are the invisible one right now, the one doing the turning at 2 in the morning, the one who got handed the bill, I need you to hear me. Somebody sees you, maybe not the ones who should, but somebody somewhere is keeping a truer account than the will ever will, and it does not go unanswered. It did not for me. It came in a forest green truck and a fireproof box and 8 words a broken man fought his own mouth to say, "You are not stuck." He was right. I never was. Tell me in the comments about the person in your life who saw you when nobody else did, and I will see you in the next one.